Hi, my name is Marc Crawley and welcome to Diversita Connect. Today we're going to talk about the Buckland Report. It's something we've touched on a couple of times in other webinars, but one of the key questions today really is it going to be relevant still in 2026? So what we're going to do is give a bit of a high level overview about what it is, go through some of the key recommendations, and then just look really to see, you know what, is this still something that's going to be talked about, discussed in 2026? So yeah, there's I suppose the main reason we've done this is there are various sort of initiatives and focuses going on at the moment, like Connect to Work. There's the Stephen Timms sort of working group. There's the Autism Act, which we covered on a previous webinar. There's various things going on, and even working in this space, I get a little bit confused about what the main focuses are, etc. So we thought we'd talk about the Buckland Report, which was obviously a big deal sort of around a year and a half ago, but I'm quite keen to see sort of how relevant it still is today. So what is it? So it was the Buckland review of autism employment was launched on February 2024, and the core aim of this, right, was about improving autism employment rates and predominantly across the next 5 years, right, from that point. So by sort of 2029, you'd imagine there'll be an improvement. Just to give it some context, at the time, I believe the Autistica statistics, and we'll cover Autistica in a bit of a webinar soon to sort of give you a high level view of what they do. But their statistics were that 71% of autistic adults were unemployed in the UK. And obviously you look at things like pathways and all of these other areas that were causing that obviously quite outrageous figure, to be honest. So the key themes of this review, and we'll add a PDF copy of the report to underneath the webinar, were around the idea of awareness and stigma. So raising awareness and reducing obviously stigma and bias, preparation and giving people the best opportunity to start or return to a career. Recruitment was one of the key themes within it. Supporting the workplace, so when you are working, what type of support you get, and of course development, progression, and I suppose really just organizations looking at autistic individuals in a way that, you know what, these individuals can contribute massively to our organization and company, and starting to look at people through a strength-based perspective. But we'll get onto a few of those in a second, right? So there were 19 recommendations in total. So I'm going to do a bit of a whistle-stop tour across these. But the first one was working with autistic people, organizations and employer-facing organizations to create a national campaign aimed at employers. Now, from then to now, I've not seen anything significant like that. It tends to be in silos. What I would say is there is Connect to Work. Whether that was a byproduct of the Buckland recommendations, I don't know. But Connect to Work is not just for autistic individuals. It's not just for neurodivergent individuals. It's for people from a variety of disadvantaged backgrounds, which can include veterans, can include physical disabilities, social economic factors, etc. as well. The other one was, the second one was promote the Autistica NDEI, or the Neurodiversity Employers Index, and those who are keen-eyed will know that we've done a webinar around the NDEI, and essentially what it was a measurement brought in by Autistica, where you could gauge how neuro-inclusive you were as a company, and Diversita did it. We engaged in this report for 2024, got a gold award, which was only one of 4 or 5 organizations that got that, so we were very, very proud. It has gone a little bit quiet since, and I think particularly since they worked to a paid model with this, I think it may have put a few organizations off, but the NDEI was certainly a keen focus then. Working with larger national or multinational organizations to develop small pilots of good practice. Again, I think that we are seeing some companies that are promoting this in a little bit more of a, I suppose, what's the word, case study way, right? So you look at people like EY and Microsoft and DXC and a few others that have these case studies. But I've not really seen anything too relevant where the company has specifically mentioned that the Buckland report or the Buckland recommendations prompted them to do it. Identify and promote cross-industry autism employment support groups. Again, I've not seen too much around that, but that was one of the key recommendations back in 2024. Ensure the design of the new universal support program meets the varied needs of autistic people, including access to a supported environment. So I don't know too much about universal support, so I'll do a little bit more research on that. But again, it's not something that in the noise of neuro-inclusion on a day-to-day basis, we hear too much around. So we're looking at 6 to 10 now. So promote supported internships as a good route for autistic young people to develop work experience and skills. Now, this is an area that I see a little bit of progress on, particularly within local authorities. The challenge with supported internships is the bit of stigma around the level of support a young person would get if, for example, they decide to withdraw from the supported internship. Supported internships tend to be an educational pathway. So, for example, if you have an educational healthcare plan or an EHCP, on the back of that, you can sort of transfer that support, and a lot of support is provided to you around the age of 25, to a supported internship. But it tends to be seen as a bit of a roll of the dice. But there's some education around that. So if you look at, we did a masterclass with Carolyn from Sutton Council about supported internships. Have a look at that and it'll give you a bit more detail around what they look like. But again, I've seen a bit of progress on that. Promote apprenticeships is another good route to develop work experience and skills. Not overly familiar with apprenticeships, but again, these pathways into work through supported internships, connect to work, and apprenticeships seem to be getting a little bit of momentum. Work with autism charities and other relevant groups to ensure autistic people know about access to work. So I think the challenge now with access to work, certainly since this report was launched, is that you could argue it's maybe a little bit oversubscribed, right? And that's not on the basis that I don't think people need the support. It's just access to work are really struggling to cope with the amount of requests coming in. So it was almost like a well-kept secret a couple of years ago. Now it's obviously more widespread, and access to work. And then there's another webinar around what is access to work. Is one of those areas now that is struggling to be able to give people what they need. And we're starting to see almost a little bit of penny pinching and reduction in costs, etc., associated with access to work. Ensure careers advisors in schools, colleges, the National Careers Service in England, and equivalents in devolved administrations all have a good understanding of autism. Wow, that was a mouthful. But essentially, I don't see a huge amount of progress in this. It's still very much a real onus on the schools, and I work with a couple, to try to go and generate work experience, to try to generate pathways. I saw a really troubling focus the other day on NEET, or not in education, employment, or training, right? And the growth of that in the UK. But it doesn't seem to take too much into account about why people become NEET in the first place. And a lot of autistic individuals are NEET. So a lot of that is because they don't get good career advice at school. I often use the example of my son. He is at university now and is on a pathway to hopefully building a career in film, and particularly sound design. But if he'd listened to his career advisor when he was at secondary school, he'd still be doing a foundation level course at Bromley College, right? Which is nothing to do with what he wanted to do. So again, I think the understanding and careers advice needs to continually improve. But it's not sometimes for want of appetite or passion from careers advisors or teachers. There just doesn't seem to be enough focus around it. Continue to develop disability confidence, increasing the rigor of development work needed to achieve the higher disability confident levels. Now, we've done a webinar around disability confident and disability committed, etc., etc. As I say, I think that this is a surface level, sorry, entry level is incredibly non-committal for organizations, right? It literally, we did it and took us about 10 minutes to fill out the form. You sort of commit verbally or in spirit really to 3 or 4 focuses, actually 5 focuses, but there's no real, you're not really held to account or anything like that, right? So moving up the levels, I'm sure, shows a better level of commitment, because obviously there's a financial investment at that point. But again, I don't know how what progress has been made in this since the Buckland report. We do see a lot more organisations maybe promoting the fact they're disability confident, disability committed, disability confident employer level, or all of the different other levels. But I'm not seeing it again sort of tied in specifically to some of these recommendations. So we're on to 11 to 14 now. So consider how the online support with employee health and disability SEHD service can link employers to appropriate and accessible advice on best practice for recruiting and supporting autistic staff. Now, I've got to be honest, I did read through the Buckland report when it came out, but this must have slipped me by because I've never heard of the SEHD. So again, I'll do a little bit of research on this, but I think the fact that I probably work in this space day in, day out, consider myself reasonably well educated around neuro-inclusion, etc. in the UK, particularly in the workplace, and I haven't heard of it, would tell you probably everything you need to know. Engage with the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, or the REC, not to be confused with the RAC, advising on the benefits autistic candidates can bring to businesses. Again, not really seen too much of a focus on this, but I was really interested in this one because I still think employment and recruitment in particular is one of the key changes that needs to happen. Identify and promote sources of information and support on becoming self-employed or establishing a social enterprise or community interest company. So trying to encourage people to build their own businesses or to build something that they can dictate their own hours and drive it. We did a webinar about sort of being a sort of an entrepreneur or working for yourself, and shared some of our own experience around setting up a business, particularly a purpose-driven business. But again, I've not really seen too much around this. Again, I'm always happy to listen to our community if there's a lot of funding out there or initiatives, but not seen too much around this. Work with the Disability Confident Business Leaders Group and staff to identify disability confident firms who have experience in successfully employing autistic people. Definitely not seeing much progress around this, but it is such a great idea. It really is. I mean, particularly if you have got organisations that have gone through the disability confidence scheme and have shown to be living up to the values and actions around their recommendations within that, and they've employed an autistic workforce or have created more inclusive recruitment processes or workplace adjustments. That's a great idea. But again, I can't say that I've seen that particularly tied into this particular recommendation. And so we're now on to the tail end of it, so 15 to 19. There's a lot, I know. Working with the CIPD to ensure the 2018 Neurodiversity at Work guidance is publicised and accessible to employers. I mean, wow, right? I mean, it's 2026 next year, right? So that's 8 years out of date. So I would suggest that guide would have been definitely superseded, and there's a lot more relevant information, including probably the information we give at Diversita. Work with autism charities to produce autism design guides for a range of industries, showing how to create appropriate and supportive design of premises, furnishings, equipment, and procedure. So I suppose in this instance, what you're looking at is it's really about, okay, how do we create environments, right, that can support neurodivergent and particularly in this instance, autistic individuals? Because I still see so many open plan offices, I still see lack of quiet spaces, all of these. So again, not seeing too much progress on that. And I've seen a few office designs recently that certainly haven't taken this into consideration. Work with software suppliers and suppliers of adaptive technology to develop IT systems that meet autistic people's needs. Now, I suppose in terms of the key recommendations from the report, not seen too much from this working committee or anything around that. However, there are tools like we interviewed Nigel Cork from Assistive on one of our masterclasses, who's got a great tool for helping support autistic individuals and neurodivergent individuals in the workplace. We looked at the Brain in Hand report recently about return on investment, and I've met Louise over at Brain in Hand, and that's an app that's quite widely used now, particularly within students and other areas. And so the technology is getting better to be able to help individuals, particularly autistic individuals. So again, I would say that there's been some progress in there. I think like anything in these recommendations, it's difficult to tie the tangibility between the report and any progress in this. But again, it's definitely something I've seen progress in. promote the value of ERGs or employee resource groups and support networks within larger organizations. So if you look at the masterclass with Nuno and Carolyn Ridley, right, that was a really good focus around building an ERG, and we've mentioned ERGs in a few of our other webinars. I have seen some progress in this. I really have. They still seem to be a little bit wrapped into a wider disability ERG, and I like the idea of having dedicated focuses around neurodiversity because it's so wide-reaching. Right? When we see people within ERGs, it's not just neurodivergent individuals; it's parents of neurodivergent children, it's advocates, it's allies, and they can be incredibly valuable in driving policy, etc. So again, I've seen some progress in this, which is always good to see. Work with autism charities, CIPD, management training organisations and other advisors to develop packages of strength-based training based on helping autistic staff to progress. So I've not seen a huge amount of sort of connection between the increase in training and this. I think the fact that this report was not actually legislation, it was almost like advice or recommendations to try and improve employment prospects for autistic individuals. It's quite difficult to mandate that. We obviously talked about the Autism Act and the I suppose the updates for from 2009 that are going to be active from July 2026. One of the key ones there was around training and making sure particularly public-facing employees and people who deal with the public or deal with customers were trained around autism. With this, I've not seen too much progress that's linked to the Buckland Report. So those are the 19 recommendations, and those who obviously follow neuroinclusion and maybe watch some of our webinars will see that there's a few things that look quite familiar. So look, I suppose the key question really is this still going to be relevant in 2026? Now, I think there's going to be aspects of it that will be, but I wouldn't say that I hear the Buckland Report spoken about quite a lot as much as I did, right? It seems to have come in, was heavily backed by sort of Deutsche Bank and etc., but seems to have sort of fizzled out with the change in government, which probably hasn't helped. We now have Stephen Timms, who is the Minister for Disability in the UK, unless I'm mistaken. He has a working group looking at neuroinclusion, but that seems to have gone a little bit quiet recently. The biggest change from a government level is obviously the revisions and review of the Autism Act of 2009, which is mentioned already, has had some recommendations to update it that are sort of going to be live from the middle part of next year. But ultimately, I still think there's a lot in here which is still needs to be addressed, right? Whether the Buckland Report is driving those recommendations or driving those focuses, it's difficult to say, but recruitment still needs a focus, right? Policy still needs a focus, office design still needs a focus, career advice still needs a focus. So the recommendations are still valid. It's not like everything's been solved in the last year and a half. But I would say that a lot of these recommendations go across the wider sort of neurodivergent community as opposed to just focusing obviously on autistic individuals. I'm not going to sit on the fence, but I would say that there's aspects of it that still will be. Whether the Buckland Report will be still spoken about in 2026 as much, I would suspect not, which is a bit of a shame because there's some good stuff in there and it was done with a lot of passion, with a lot of contributions and took a long time, right? So, but let's see. But ultimately, I think there's still a lot of work to do, but I'm quite positive about some of the progress that hopefully will be made in 2026. So, what next? So obviously we'll add the webinar, this to the webinar collections, but let us know your thoughts on the report. Yeah, I mean, one of our sort of most valued members, Colin, has done his own sort of review of the Buckland Report. So definitely be interested in hearing a little bit more about that. And if there's anything we've missed, of course, which I'm sure there is, but I'd love to know your thoughts on the report and some of these recommendations. Max Green, who's one of our most keen sort of advocates and sort of ambassadors at Diversita, he interviewed Sir Robert Buckland on YouTube. So I'll add the link into the chat as well. So have a look at that. And that was a really interesting conversation to try to see firsthand what obviously Sir Robert Buckland was trying to achieve with this. And of course, like, you want to DM us, of course you can. We're always happy to hear from you. And of course, any new members that are watching this, obviously it's lovely to see you as well. So look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. But of course, I'm always happy to hear any comments and on this one as well. And I suppose the last final question is, do you think the Buckland Report is going to be relevant in 2026? And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Brilliant. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, share and subscribe. And scan the QR code to join the Diversita Connect community.